Hey guys, after I made the following video, I found something and I wanted to show you guys. So in the video, I talk a little bit about my experience in Iraq. I was in the second Iraq conflict. I was, despite my appearance, too young to be in the first one. So before I show you this, I'm going to give you I guess a little information. So the conflict lasted from 2003, March of 2003 to December of 2011. So it was about 8 years and 8 months long. Just looking at the numbers here, about 25,000 coalition members died. That includes Americans, British, even Iraqis and Kurds who were fighting on our behalf. And about 118,000 were wounded. Anywhere between 34,000 and 34,000 and 72,000 Iraqi combatants were killed in the conflict. We don't really know. Those are estimates. And over 1 million Iraqis displaced from their homes, lives torn apart, trauma, and the decade that followed of an unstable government. Saddam Hussein was a monster, but unstable government. But we also put Saddam Hussein in place. Anyway, whatever. What do I want to show you? So even this is what I got. This what I'm about to show you is almost 20 years old, and I got this when I was in Iraq. And if you can't, I'm trying to talk. So if you can't see this, it is a Hard Rock Cafe Baghdad shirt. There was no Hard Rock Cafe Baghdad shirt. That's a joke, guys. And it says, because you can't see this, under new management, closed for renovation because we bombed it. That's the joke. So, yeah, this country that we invaded, you could get merch. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hey guys, I hope you're having a pleasant day. If the lighting looks a little odd here, it's because usually when I film during the day, which I don't very often, I use just natural lighting. Now I'm using a combination of the two, so it may look a little off. Anyway, so if you watch my videos, you can probably guess that my political views put me a little, probably a bit left to Democrats. I'm not really much of a activist. I don't participate in politics a lot. I've been involved in 3 demonstrations. One was an anti-war demonstration after I got out of the military and actually volunteered to serve overseas. And 2 were essentially like marriage equality demonstrations. I give to, I donate to some groups. I think I've given to some animal rights groups. I've a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, but I'm not really active. A lot of, I guess, like I said, most of my views are to the left of the Democrats. There are a few things which probably would kind of come off as odd for being a leftist. I'm even though I don't hunt. I'm a vegetarian. I am pro hunters. I am pro hunting. I support hunters for the reason that they are often the ones who are they are kind of often environmental activists. I'm for having a fairly strong military. Do I think we should have bases all around the world? No, but I support having a strong military and a strong defense. I'm kind of neutral on the issue with guns. I own guns. I own firearms. I grew up with firearms. I'm not actually like a big fan of firearms. This will sound kind of silly. I just had this realization recently. The reason I'm not a big fan of firearms is because they're loud. I'm not even joking. I've never been the biggest fan of firearms. I've been shooting them as early as I could hold one, but I'm not even really a big fan of them. But at the same time, I do believe that if we could possibly Thanos snap all the firearms away in the country, yeah, the crime rate would go down. And people who want to comment in the sections, okay, then just ignore every other country in the world that doesn't have firearms, or say people would kill, one another in other means. Okay, acid, knives, nunchucks, bolos. Okay, yeah. Well, I'll say this: someone can get stabbed 20 times and live. If you get shot 20 times, unless you're 50 Cent, you're probably not going to make it through there. But that's not really the discussion I'm having today. I've always been on the left, but I would say that the military probably moved me a little bit further on the left, and I'm going to explain why and how basically I could kind of get into the whole thing, but I'm just gonna at this point distill it into 3 anecdotes, 3 stories, and kind of explain what effect it had on me. So the first one is the very job I had. So when I was in the Air Force, and I went in as an officer in 2002, and it was not like a substantial career. A matter of fact, I had an honorable discharge, but I got out just shy of hitting my 4-year mark because they basically hired too many people in my career field. And later on, they said we didn't have enough, and it was all whatever. But by that point, I'm like, well, I've done everything I wanted to do. Now I want to go back to school. But I went in as what was referred to, or what is still called, I don't know what it said was referred to, what's called the 63 Alpha, which is a program manager, which is a very, very nice job. You are it's acquisitions management, but you're a contractor, so you work with defense contractors and blah, blah, blah. So just about the entire time I was in, with the exception of when I deployed to Iraq, I worked on the group that was adopting the AIM-9X missile. So for you guys who aren't familiar, the AIM-9 series of missiles, the AIM stands for Air Intercept Missile, and is a short-range air-to-air missile. So just think you have a short range, you have a medium range, and you have a long range. And the short range are like, jets fighting, well, air-to-air means it's hitting other craft in the air, and short range means think you're using a dogfight. Just imagine that. So these missiles are basically like aircraft in them themselves with explosive ordnance on them. They are basically a system. It's an entire system in itself when you think of the missile. It's pretty complex. So what was going on is that at that point, the Air Force had been using the variant which was referred to as the AIM-9M missile, and they were replacing with the AIM-9X missile, which was the next generation. And the main difference was some differences in the tracking, the telemetry system. I think the little, I don't know, say the fins. I don't know, I can't remember if they're called the fins. The fins were smaller, which would allow it to maneuver better. And I don't know if I already mentioned this. It's referred to as a Sidewinder missile, if you've ever heard of a Sidewinder. And the reason it's called a Sidewinder because when it first came out, it had this defect where when it would fly, it would kind of do this waving motion like a Sidewinder, and the name stuck. Okay. So we were still doing a sustainment of the AIM-9M missile, but we were in a joint operation with the Navy. They were the lead, where they were replacing the AIM-9M missile with the AIM-9X missile. And this, the funding for much of this activity, if not all of it, was what was referred to as GWOT money, GWOT, Global War on Terrorism. So by the way, yes, the military in general uses a lot of acronyms. That's one of the defining characteristics of the military. So the thing about the Global War on Terrorism at this point is it was the textbook case of what's referred to as asymmetrical warfare. And it's a larger opponent fighting a smaller opponent without all the resources. So what we're doing here is we're getting this money to help us fight terrorists. And, in this case, terrorists was, it was kind of a euphemism for, defiant Muslims. But it was fighting the global war on terrorism. And we were putting millions of dollars into getting these new missiles. So just to give you an idea of this, when you buy a missile, you don't just buy the missile you shoot with. You buy at least 3 types of missiles. You have the active missile, the one that gets loaded on the planes. You have what's referred to as a CATM, which is I wish I could remember what that CATM stands for, but it's basically a missile with it has all the components except for the explosive component, and it's used for training because missile loaders, they basically have to repair, they have to maintain, they have to work with the electronics, and it's used for that. And then you have the DATM, which is I think it's dummy active missile, but I'm not sure. And it's basically just a hollowed out shell. It has the weight and the balance of a missile, but it doesn't have any of the expensive components. So the dummy, the DATM, if I remember correctly, now these missiles and things I should remember, I think they're maybe like, I'll put the measurements there, because right away I want to say that the AIM-9 was maybe around 7 feet, 6-7 feet long, but maybe longer than that. I think I may be getting it. I know I worked on the AIM-120 as well, but that one's much longer. But these are, big, heavy things. And so they have a separate missile that they use to, like I said, that they use to carry. One they use to train with the electronics. And they have the actual missile. Now, the Datum, which is basically this hollowed out shell, costs about $80,000. It costs $80,000. I think the Catum, and this isn't 2000 money, 2002, 2004, 2005 money, and I'm just and I think the Catum cost around $150,000. These aren't even the missiles that are being used in the craft, and these are thousands of missiles that are being built. And not only are they paying for the missiles, but there's a contract that goes with the missiles. So this missile is bought from Raytheon, and part of that contract, think of it as like a warranty, where you pay for the missile, but you also pay for the support. So there's a lot of money going into this contractor. Now, once again, I'm going to say this again, the money paying for this was Global War on Terrorism missile, or Global War on Terrorism money, and this is a short-range air-to-air missile. Now, I'm going to pause for a moment to let that sink in what's kind of funny about that. Okay, it's a short-range air-to-air missile. Why do you need a short-range air-to-air missile to fight terrorists? Now, I'm not saying that we didn't need to get a more advanced short-range air-to-air missile. There were other defense contractors who were building ones, and we want to say, like I said, I believe in having a strong military. So let's be ahead of our enemies. But why are we funneling this money, which is supposed to go to the Global War on Terrorism, to buy short-range air-to-air missiles when terrorists don't have jets that we fight against? And at the same time, and I'm going to get to the thing going to Iraq, but I'll kind of jump ahead a little bit. You have Marines who were overseas who didn't have proper armor. So we're spending hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on on using Global War on Terrorism money to get more advanced air-to-air missiles. Meanwhile, Marines don't have the body armor or the proper, or really it was more of a case of the up-armored Humvees that they needed to do their job. And when asked about this, the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, said, "You fight with the army you have and not the army you want."
Yes, Mr. Secretary. Our soldiers have been fighting in Iraq for coming up on 3 years. A lot of us are getting ready to move north relatively soon. Our vehicles are not armored. We're digging pieces of rusted scrap metal and compromised ballistic glass that's already been shot up, dropped, busted, picking the best out of this scrap to put onto our vehicles to take into combat. We do not have proper armament vehicles to carry with us north.
I talked to the general coming out here about the pace at which the vehicles are being armored. They have been brought from all over the world, wherever they're not needed, to a place here where they are needed. I'm told that they're being, the Army is, I think it's something like 400 a month are being done. And it's essentially a matter of physics. It isn't a matter of money. It isn't a matter on the part of the Army of desire. It's a matter of production and capability of doing it. As you know, you go to war with the Army you have, not the Army you might want or wish to have at a later time.
The military, but whatever. So you send these people over there. We weren't attacked by Iraq. And we weren't attacked by Afghanistan. We were attacked by a terrorist organization in Afghanistan. So we started this war, sending our guys over there, not properly supplied. Meanwhile, you're funneling money into Raytheon. That's corporate welfare, and I was part of that. So the thing that got me is that every time I would look at a spreadsheet, and I would have these numbers, and I would be crunching these numbers and doing these estimates and seeing how much the sustainment. In my mind, I would be thinking, okay, what could you be doing with this money? What else could you be doing with this money? Could you be helping schools? Could you be educating people? Could you be feeding people? But it's corporate welfare. And if you ever wonder why the Air Force has such great bases, it's because we spend a lot of money. And the Air Force is a great way to funnel money, to funnel corporate welfare to the corporations. Now, my criticism is not of the military. I respect the military, and if I were 20 years younger and getting out of college again, I'd probably go back in, except by going to the Space Force. Honestly, I probably would. So I to say you like the military is an odd thing to say, and I know that but I like the military and I respect the military. But the military is a tool. My criticism is the politicians and the corporations. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is two things that I noticed in Iraq. So when I was in Iraq, I was part of MNSTIKI. That stands for Multinational Strategic Transition Command in Iraq. Okay, so even when I was over there, I didn't do anything substantial. Just like most of my career in the Air Force, it was sitting around. Occasionally, I would volunteer to go on convoys and security details, and I would. It's kind of like, because of the rank and position I was in, I had the ability to sign things and write off on things that other people couldn't. Not a whole lot because of my rank, but other people couldn't. All right, so one of basic experience I had over there. So like I mentioned before, the Marines and a lot of the soldiers, there was they weren't properly supplied. A lot of them weren't properly supplied. So not only does this go to armor for their vehicles, but it goes to rifles. So at the time, the military was largely using the M16, and they were slowly phasing out, or not phasing out, but they were giving the M4 variant, which is which basically, I think it uses like 75% of the components of the M16. The only thing is it's a smaller rifle and it's collapsible. So when I was over there, I had the M4. I had the best armor. I had the best. We had the best Humvees. We even had up armored Suburbans. We had the best stuff because, like I said earlier, I was working for MNSTIKI, Multinational Strategic Transition Command in Iraq, and the group that I was with was the group that was training and supplying the new Iraqi military and police forces. So we were doing a lot of contracts. It was through us that companies, corporations, whatever, were funneling money. If you went there, if you're in Iraq, everything there had KBR on it. KBR, Kellogg Brown and Root, the subsidiary of Halliburton, which was, the company that Dick Cheney was the boss of at one point. He had a whole lot of stock there. So the money, we were one of the channels in which they were able to funnel money into from the various coalition governments into these corporations. And we had the best stuff because just like being in the Air Force, you're able to, you're the means in which they can funnel a lot of money to corporations. The organization we were with, you were able to do a lot of contracts and make people a lot of money. And the last thing I'll say, which isn't anything substantial, is when you were in Iraq, you were able to buy a hamburger for about $6. Now, that sounds, what does that have to do with anything? Well, think about it this way. You're in the middle of a war zone, and and this is in the green zone. This is in the, within the green zone, you have the embassy, and you have a Burger King, and you're able to buy a Whopper at the same price you can get one in the United States, basically. That shouldn't happen because when you're getting that hamburger, think of all the stuff, all the resources that go into you getting that hamburger that don't go into getting it when you're in the U.S. The insurance, the security, the logistics. This is all being subsidized by the government. So on one hand, it's nice to have those conveniences far away, but on the other hand, it's a way of funneling money into these corporations. So after just the few years I was in the military, few years I was in the Air Force, I saw so much money being funneled into corporations. And I would always think to myself, how could this be be better allocated. Because there's a difference between having a strong defense and having corporate welfare, and we crossed that line. So and everybody, by the way, was on board with this. The Democrats were on board with it. The Republicans were on board with it. Even now, more so, the Republicans are on board with it. But I will say this: whenever you hear Republicans say that the Democrats just want to spend, remember the Republicans want to do that as well. It's just that their spending goes towards, and I'll say it again, corporate welfare.